My name is Logan Liuzzo, and first of all, I just want to say how crazy this is for me, because I grew up in this church since I was born. I've seen so many people up here, and it's just crazy because I never thought I'd be one of those people, but I'm so glad and so thankful for this opportunity. But today is a special day. It's Prayer Sunday, and when my dad called me and told me about this Sunday, I was so excited because I firsthand have seen the power of prayer. It's just what God can do through it. And I know there's so many people in this room today that are going through things, whether it be known or not, God knows. And we all face problems, but we all have the same thing in common, and it's that we can't face this alone. There's more to your story, and I can say this because I've lived it and I know it's true. When I was 18 years old, I thought I had my life all figured out. I had just graduated high school, and I was going to Pensacola Christian College for electrical engineering. I had already been accepted, and I was getting ready, I was packing, I was so excited. Out of nowhere, I began to have this cough. And this cough, started out as a normal cough, but it quickly grew into something more aggressive. And it got to the point that I couldn't even sleep some nights because this cough would keep me up. So we got this cough checked out. So we went to the doctors, and I remember me and my mom walked in, not expecting a single thing to be wrong. We walked in, and I just remember laughing and joking and having a good time, not knowing what was going to come next. As we were sitting there, the doctors came in, and we weren't expecting anything to be wrong. We figured it was just a slight cough that would go away at some point. But he sat me down, and I remember the mood instantly changed. Out of nowhere, we heard the words, "You have a mass in your chest, and we believe it's cancerous." I was given this opportunity to speak today because I know so many people have felt the same thing. Whether it be medical issues or something else, we can be going on with our normal lives and out of nowhere get hit with the hardest news ever. That's hard to handle. My life changed in one moment. They immediately took me back, and they put me on IVs, and they put me through scans and everything to get a better look at this cancer. And within a matter of moments, my entire life changed. I lived in a hospital from that moment out. For the next 6 months, they decided the best option was to go with chemo treatments. So for 6 months, I had chemo treatments. And while I was having those chemo treatments, they decided that after those 6 months were up, they would attempt a surgery. And I was so excited because they told me this surgery wasn't anything crazy. They said they've done this before. They said we were going to operate, we would open you up, pull the tumor out, and you'd be on your way to college. I was so excited because the surgeon was so confident that this would work. But I learned very quickly that things don't always go to plan. I went in for my surgery, they put me under and began operating. And I remember the next thing I saw was my dad. And I woke up and I looked my dad in the eyes and I said, "Dad, did they get the cancer? Am I cancer-free now?" My dad, he couldn't bear to tell me, and he just kept avoiding the question. He kept saying, "We'll talk about it later." And later on, the surgeon came in and met with me, and he sat me down, and he said the words, he said, "We weren't able to remove the tumor, and not only were we not able to remove it, it's so much worse than we thought." The tumor had invaded around my arteries. It was attached to my heart. And he said the words to me, "If I would have kept operating on you, you could have died." And that's so terrifying for an 18-year-old to hear. I went from having my life all planned out and ready to not knowing what my future held. I had gone through months of chemo treatments and so much pain and sickness, all for nothing, and it was weighing on me because I was back at square one. Can I be honest with you guys? I was fighting this physical fight with cancer, but I had no idea the spiritual toll it would take on me as well. The whole time, every time I would hear bad news, it hit me harder and harder, and I began to lose faith in God. Why does a God that tells me he loves me allow me to go through this? I wouldn't say I was a bad kid growing up. All I wanted to do was go to college, live a normal life, and now instead I'm stuck back at in a hospital room watching all my friends grow up without me. I began to feel lost and alone, wondering why God had left me. I couldn't figure out why this was happening, and it drove me to the point that I even had doubts if God was even real. And I think so often we can lose sight of God because we get so focused on ourselves, and we allow Satan to creep in our minds and mess with us. But can I tell you something, is that God taught me so many amazing things through this journey. The first thing he taught me is when God seems silent, he's still working. After my surgery failed, I felt lost and I felt alone, but God began to work in my life. He showed me this verse, and this is a verse that so many of us know, and I guarantee you half of us in this room have this verse memorized, but I feel like we can lose the sight of the meaning of this verse so often. And it says in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not on thine own understandings. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." God began to work in my life through this verse, and I had to take a step back and realize something. Did God stop working, or was he just doing something different than my plans? Did God leave me, or did he just have something bigger for me? And once I read this verse, it began to put into perspective for me that it's not always about me. I wasn't trusting in the Lord, and I was expecting God to work according to my plans because for some reason I thought that I knew how to beat cancer better than God did. Let me tell you, the Bible never says you have to have everything figured out, but it does say you have to trust the one who does. What I love about this verse is it talks about trust, and it's talking about the trust of a child. And it says to trust the Lord with all thine heart. When I was a kid, anything I couldn't fix, my dad was somehow able to fix. If I had a broken toy, my dad knew how to fix it. If I couldn't get my video game to work, my dad was in there fixing it. And I didn't always know how he was fixing it, but I knew that if I called my dad, he had some magical powers and he could fix it. God is working even though you might not always be able to see it. But we have to start by trusting God with our brokenness and see what he can do with it.
That's right.
The second thing that God showed me was that God does everything on purpose. After my first surgery failed, I met with the surgeon. He came to our room and he sat us down and he said, "To be honest with you, we're running out of options." He said, "You're maxed out on the chemo that you've been taking." I said, "We can't attempt surgery again because you just had it." And he said, "We only have one attempt left at surgery." But he said, "We have an idea." He had this experimental chemo pill. He said, "It's not designed for your cancer." He said, "We have no idea if it'll work, but we have reason to believe it might." So that's what we went with. And this pill quickly earned the name Miracle Pill in our family, because not only did this pill shrink my cancer way more than we ever expected it to, but I felt good on this pill. I was able to, go do the normal things that I would usually do. I was able to start work again, and I was able to go on family vacations and help out with the youth group because this pill not only worked but had little to no side effects. But through this pill, it opened the opportunity for me to help out in our youth group. And I remember one night, I had the privilege of helping out with the real-life all-nighter activity. And I remember going in, and we ate food and played games and did all this fun stuff. And we got to the message, and to be honest, I couldn't tell you what the message was about. I just remember being so convicted. After the sermon, I went and I found a room, and I just sat by myself and I prayed. And I realized I had been so selfish about my prayers lately. Every prayer I did was, God, why is this happening to me? Why are you doing this to me? God, do you even love me anymore? And I realized that it's not always about me. God showed me that it's bigger than me sometimes. And from that moment on, I started praying a different prayer. I said, God, I don't know what you're doing, but I pray that you'd use me through it. This is a hard prayer to pray. And I'm not saying this to brag on me whatsoever, but I'm saying this because I think it's something that we need to realize, is that God can use your brokenness for crazy things. God put me in this impossible situation for a reason. And our jobs as Christians is to make God known. And if I'm put in this impossible situation, God must have a plan for it. In Romans 8:28, it says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them that are called according to his purpose. God can take the worst of your suffering and use it for good if you're willing to let him. Because the current suffering you're facing is temporary, but God can do something amazing if you wait on his timing. And God did just that. He continued to work, and because of that, I got to see, number 3, that we serve a powerful God. Yes. Over the next year after the chemo pill and my surgery failed, we had a lot of ups and downs. The chemo was working, and then it wasn't. And my tumor was shrinking, and then it grew back. But for some reason, it felt different. We knew that God had a plan. God ended up opening the door for me to go to Cleveland Clinic Hospital. And we drove down there to Cleveland. We sat down with the specialist, and it was a whole different environment. He had a lot better attitude about it, and it was just so encouraging. He was excited about it. He had a plan that he wanted to do several rounds of radiation. And after the radiation, he wanted to attempt surgery again. And this was a terrifying thing to hear, that I had to think about surgery again. But we knew that God had a plan through it. So we began to follow this plan, and me and my mom drove out to Cleveland, and we lived there for weeks at a time. And during that time, my dad emphasized prayer so much. We had people at our church praying every day for just a miracle to happen. Not only was it me and my family praying, but it was our entire church family and other churches around the world that were constantly praying. This entire month, we emphasized praying, and we followed God, and we trusted him through my treatments. Because we know that there's power in prayer, and that God has power. We knew that if we wanted to see a miracle, we had to seek out the one that does miracles. The next day, after all this stuff, we began to prepare for surgery. And the night before my surgery, my family and my entire extended family all got together in a room. We started praying. And we prayed for God to do a miracle. And we knew that our entire church was praying too. I had the privilege of being up here and being prayed over and anointed just like we're doing today. And at the time, it's scary, and you don't know what's going to happen. It's not easy being left in the unknown. But looking back on it, it's so cool to see how God was working through the entire thing. So the next day, after we prayed, we walked in for surgery. And for some reason, I had this crazy peace during the surgery. We were laughing and joking on the way there. I got to hug my parents as I went in, and it just felt different. But I knew this time that I had an army of people praying for a miracle behind me. And sometimes it can be so hard to trust God with our problems. But let me tell you, when you trust the creator of the universe, it will change your life. In Ephesians 3:20, it says, "Now unto him that is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us." God not only has the power to handle your problems, but God has no limits. He can do so much more than you can even imagine. And long story short, I'm cancer-free now. The surgery worked, and now today I get to stand up here 100% cancer-free. They were able to not only remove the tumor, they had 0 complications with it. And all the side effects that they said I'd have from all those chemo treatments, I have 0. Because God is able to do so much more than you can imagine.
That's right.
Your situation might feel impossible today, but we serve a God that's able to do the impossible.
That's right.
One of my favorite parts about this story, or about this verse, is it says God is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that we ask or think.
That's right.
Let me show you how cool God is. Before cancer, I had my life all figured out. I was ready for college. I was ready to be an electrical engineer. And if that would have happened, I would be sitting at a desk job right now. I'd still be scared to talk to people because I did not like talking to people back then. And I would never in a million years be up on the stage. But thank God that He does more than we can even imagine. Because through this journey, God worked in my life, and God led me into ministry. And now I'm going into my 3rd year at college for youth ministry.
Yay!
And I'm not just saying this, but I couldn't be happier.
Yeah.
Because sometimes situations can feel impossible, but to God, they're just stepping stones for Him to do a miracle.
That's right.
I don't know what you're going through today, but I know we have a lot of hurting people in this room. And I've been there, and it's not easy. But I know that we all serve the same God.